everybody, and welcome to the GoBundance Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Gruber. In today's episode, we interviewed yet another GoBundance member named Daniel Casey, and it was really fascinating. I've met Daniel. I've gotten to know him a little bit over the last few months, maybe a year or so, and he's a great dude. He's got a great story, but I even took away some things that I didn't know about him that I thought were essential. He's talking about how he went from general contracting and the revelation or epiphany he had around going from a general contractor to owning multifamily and why he did that. He'll talk about how he scaled to over 60 units and how he's about to, I think, essentially triple that in the next few months. And really what the value he has in investing in a high dollar market, something that a lot of real estate investors out there struggle with, like, how do I cash flow in a coastal market? He talks about some of the specific tactics and how he structured his business in order to buy property and cash flow in even an expensive market. So check that out. We get deep into some other topics, one of which I thought was most interesting. It's mountain goat hunting. Never heard of it before. He goes detailed, bullet by bullet, with how exactly you can also go mountain goat hunting, which I have no idea how to do that. And something I loved, he talked a little bit about some of the things that he loves and appreciates about himself, something that maybe some of us don't do for ourselves sometimes. So check it out. Make sure you like, subscribe, let us know what you think about this. Drop a comment. Tell us what you think about Daniel and his interview. But until then, let's go in and talk to Daniel Casey. Daniel, welcome.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Great having you on. You got to tell a little bit of your story to the Emerge group through the Millionaire Case Study feature that we have there, which was great. But I'd love to get your background for everybody. Just kind of like where you're from, what do you do now? Kind of give us the whole story of you.
Okay, so short version of my background is I'm currently a multifamily real estate investor. However, for the last 20 years, I've been a contractor. We've been a general contractor doing everything from highway and bridge construction work for the first 10 years of that to commercial general contracting for the second 10 years of that. And that's kind of what opened our eyes to the idea of doing multifamily investing. We were the contractor on a handful of large multifamily projects, and we realized that we'd rather be the owner than the contractor. Prior to getting into construction, my original career was as an accountant. I graduated from UCLA with the intention of being a CPA, and I went and worked for KPMG. So I had kind of just a cup of coffee in the world of Big Six accounting, and realized very quickly that wasn't where I wanted to go. And so I think I was only there, I don't even know if I was there 2 full years, but pretty quickly out of college, realized I didn't want to work for anybody else.
Did you work for one of the big firms? Is it Big Six or Big Four? Why have I heard Big Four?
Well, it's Big Four now. I want to say at the time it was the Big Six still. I worked for KPMG, which was...
You mentioned, that's right, KPMG. Yeah. Yep, gotcha. All right, cool. So you went from CPA, was that local where you are now in Washington, or was that...
I did work out of the Seattle office. I was not a CPA. I was a CPA candidate. I never took the exam. So I was actually working on a client site in, I think, Tallahassee, Florida. The weekend I was scheduled to take the exam, and by that time I had already decided that I didn't want to be a CPA, and so I didn't even bother flying home. So I never took the CPA exam. I'm not a CPA. It was just I was an aspiring CPA.
That's your cup of coffee. Understood. General contracting. So you mentioned it was better to be the owner than the contractor in that regard. Give a little more on that. Why did you realize that? What was the realization on that? Because you were still a business owner with a contracting firm, but you felt like it was better to go into being a real estate owner.
Well, so it was kind of twofold. So somewhere in the 2015, 2016 range is probably the first time, at least in the modern years, that I, took a look at what my net income, what my net worth was, and really kind of tried to get a handle on my finances. And it was obvious at that point that my net worth was, right around $1 million. I don't have the exact number, but all of it was tied up in a couple of pieces of real estate that we owned. We had bought an office building for the contractor, because we needed an office, and we also owned a small industrial building because we needed a shop. And then I had a duplex that was my original. I lived in it, 21 years ago, and we still had it as a rental. But none of those were bought as investments with any sort of intention. They were always kind of bought to fill needs. I needed a house, I needed an office, I needed a industrial property, and then it was kind of this aha moment 16 years later that I've been a contractor for 16 years and making an income, but I didn't have anything to show from that. The only net worth I had was tied up in these real estate assets. But that didn't fully flip the switch. The other side of it was we had started doing a bunch of relatively large scale remodeling projects for Sunrise Senior Living. They're a large senior living owner. and they had bought a portfolio. They had bought 3 buildings from Aetna, another big senior living owner, and they basically transformed them. And just kind of by being involved in those projects, I got to see, I mean, I think they paid about 20 million for the 3 building portfolio. And we did close to $10 million worth of work. But I think at one point when we weren't even done yet, I'd kind of heard it rumored that they were worth somewhere in the $45 to $50 million range. And I'm kind of thinking, well, shoot, it'd be a lot better to be the owner on these than the contractor. And so that was kind of that was sort of when I realized that this is probably a route we should pursue.
Gotcha. Now, today, is the general contracting business still in play, or is it something you've sunsetted completely, or just sort of touched?
So we made the decision. I kind of made the decision in, kind of 2017, 2018, that we were going to start pursuing real estate investing more or less full time. So we bought our first multifamily property in August of 2018. And we kind of, basically stopped bidding on any new construction work. And so by the end of 2019, we were 100% out of customer work. We kind of just worked off our backlog and then, stopped. So yeah, so we took our, general contracting business all the way down from, I think there was, possibly 20 something employees at the time we made the decision. And I think we were all the way down as low as 2 at such point as we, we're full-time on our own projects.
I'm curious, because I'm not in that space. I'm in real estate. So I've never, I would say, owned a business outside of a real estate business, right? So did the business have inherent value? Was it something that you could have sold or something that you?
No. And see, and that was really the thing that I started searching for back in 2016 was kind of, for the most part, a contractor is not worth much more than just the people you have working for you. I mean, you might, you could own some real estate or you could own some heavy equipment if you're that type of a contractor, and that would have some value. But at the end of the day, you're only as good as your next project. And, so if you have a really good team and some really awesome project managers and estimators, I mean, you have some value there, but we were never quite that big. We were always kind of mom and pop. And so the reality is there was no intrinsic value. It was kind of like, in order to make more money, we had to go win more jobs, and we couldn't really sell it. And I was really looking, I actually looked at a couple of other industries. Most closely, I looked at starting a property management company, because I just liked the idea of recurring revenue. I liked the idea that if I accumulated a few hundred doors as a property manager, that had value that I could turn around and at some point sell that business. And thankfully, I didn't end up starting a property management company. But
why, thankfully?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, now we're doing property management. We have our own internal management company, but clearly, there's a lot. It's a lot better to be on the owner side of the equation than the property manager.
Gotcha.
Not that that's a bad business if that's what somebody wants to go into. I mean, we maybe at some point in time we'll actually start managing other people's properties, but that's not what we're doing right now.
No, makes sense. Makes complete sense. You say we. Who is we, if you don't mind me asking? Is that you, your wife, or is that?
I always talk in we. I mean we, as in me and my team here, but it's really just me. It's just myself and my wife, but she's not involved in the day-to-day operation. So I'm kind of the sole owner.
Well, I saw somewhere, it's funny you say that. I don't know where I saw it, but a quote or something where it said that the highly successful, the most successful, maybe even the billionaires speak in terms of we. They never talk in terms of me, right? What you just said, okay, you are the sole proprietor, sole owner of this business, but you value, by saying we, you value the entirety of your team and include them in the success that you've had, which I think is really cool. So just the point I wanted to kind of, honor you on and put out there for everybody else that's watching or listening right now. So very cool. Yeah, of course. So you joined GoBundance when?
I joined in October of 2018.
What's your portfolio look like today as far as multifamily?
Today, so as of today, we've got 62 multifamily units, and then we also have an office building and that industrial building I mentioned before. So that's our entire portfolio. We're in contract to purchase 64 more units, and then we're also in contract to purchase a local motel here.
Oh, nice. If you don't mind me asking, what's the plan with the motel?
So it was originally brought to me as an apartment conversion project by a wholesaler that I work with. And so I was looking at it, I got it under contract with the idea that we might convert this from a motel to apartments. But then after doing some due diligence, we realized it just wasn't practical in the way the jurisdiction was. I mean, we would have needed so many different variances to even get from motel to apartments. And then once we got there, the zoning and the densest zoning the city had would have only allowed 17 units on the lot. So then we would have had to be creating an entirely new zoning density. It just kind of seemed like this wasn't going to be a practical approach. But in the process, we realized that there's probably some real money in the motel. I mean, it's kind of like it's an underutilized asset. It's in a really good part of town. It's walking distance from the hospital, which is the largest employer. Mm-hmm. And the big thing for us is, so we're really more of a developer than a real estate investor. I mean, our big deal is that we do a lot of heavy renovation, but especially because of different issues with COVID right now, it's very hard to control vacancy on apartment buildings. So we're a little bit at the mercy of when people come and go in terms of how many units we can renovate. And it seemed like a real advantage to have 51 motel rooms that all needed renovation, where we can completely control the availability of those, so that it would allow us to sort of scale up the construction side without fear that, we won't be able to get 3 more units to do next month, because we'd always have this kind of backlog of motel rooms to renovate. So whenever there weren't apartments available, we'd be able to, kind of fall back on that. So that's been the plan. And they, motels kick off a lot of cash. I was kind of shocked to see how much, the potential cash flow could be. Hopefully
would it run like a motel, or is it going to be run Airbnb? Like, how would you actually run it?
We're our plan is to basically run it like a extended stay motel. So it'll still be a nightly rental, but we are going to we're going to put kitchenettes in them and make them kind of efficiency extended stay sort of concept. And we are sort of expecting, with the hospital walking distance, there are a lot of, kind of contractors and travel nurse types that would be, essentially looking for longer term out of town housing. And so we think that could probably be about 50% of our occupancy.
Interesting. You're a coastal investor. You're Tacoma, Seattle area, maybe all Tacoma for that.
Yeah, we're 100% in the Tacoma market. Yeah.
Okay. Expensive market. That's not a cheap market. And I think that's a struggle for me to look at deals outside of where I am now in Michigan, back where I'm from in New York and Boston, where you are, LA, all of that, and find deals that seem to work. So can you give, a couple of thoughts on how do you find deals at high price points per unit, like you have to buy in a Tacoma? Mm-hmm. How do you find those and how do you make them work? Is it just that rents and all of that are high enough, or is there another trick?
So I think, we're kind of just, we're gaining clarity on this as we go. And so, I'm probably going to give you a different answer today than I would have given you 60 days ago.
Sure.
But I think the real benefit of investing in a market, in a more urban, low cap rate market like Tacoma or Seattle, or like in any other kind of larger cities, is that we have a full spectrum of renters. Like, we have everything from, your typical workforce housing style, your working class renter, all the way up to, multi 6-figure earning millennials who just don't want to buy a house. And so what we really do is we buy kind of underutilized C-class assets in desirable neighborhoods, and we turn them into what we call B+. But what we're really doing is creating affordable middle-class housing. Like, we're not trying to buy, workforce housing, make some improvements, and then re-rent it back out to workforce tenants for a few $100 more than they were paying before. We're really trying to buy, C-class assets in good neighborhoods, do significant renovations, significantly increase the finish level and, the amenities. And then we're renting them back out to middle-class tenants, who the alternative for them is either Class A downtown high-rise style apartments, or buying a home, which in our neighborhood is extremely unaffordable. So, we buy, we're looking at a project right now where, current rent on the 2-bedroom apartments that that are in there now is somewhere between, $900 and $1,100 a month. But these are, they're maintained, but old finishes. These are very low end apartments. We're planning on doing a couple $1 million worth of renovation to this community, fully renovating all of the units. We're looking at rents on the backside of that are more like, $1,750 to $1,950 a month. So, it's not just a slight repositioning of C-class asset. Like, we're kind of creating an asset for a totally different client.
What age of building are these? You say C class. Is it C class in age built in the 60s, 70s, or more new?
Yeah, I mean, I think the particular one I was talking about was built in 66, maybe 64, something like that.
Wow.
I mean, a lot of stuff in this, a lot, the oldest buildings in Tacoma are 100 years old, like, early 1900s. But there's kind of, as you get outside of the real core, there was a lot of, kind of apartment communities, garden style apartment communities that were built in the 60s and 70s. And so there's a lot of those assets out on the market where they've been maintained and maybe somewhat updated, but now all of a sudden they're sitting in an area where the average single family home sells for $700,000 or $800,000, and you've still got a, 2-bedroom apartment that you can rent for $900. So like there's kind of there's a gap.
It's interesting. I was talking to a guy last night about what he calls a CapEx tsunami coming, meaning 60s, which I own as well, 60s and 70s built garden style apartment buildings that people have purchased. You go in, like I don't do what you do. You're doing like a full on gut job with, millions of dollars of renovation and updating all the units and making it, like you said, you're jumping a class essentially by what you do. But his point was, a lot of those buildings, people buy them, they're buying them at a premium. And then now you're going to have these issues with, electrical or whatever the case may be. But you're getting ahead of that. It sounds like you're essentially, you're eliminating CapEx right up front by putting it into the property. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, and the truth is, we kind of think of ourselves a lot more like a developer. We're really, it's not new construction, but it's significant enough that I would think our business model looks a little bit more like a developer than it does just a typical real estate investor. But that's what we're doing is we're basically completely repositioning these assets.
Very cool. No, interesting. Again, I love the story. I love hearing about what you've done. I feel like there was one other thing, but I'll skip past it and we'll dive into the rest of it. But no, man, I appreciate all of your openness on this. It's interesting to hear how you do that, where you do it. And you've got a very specific model that you've applied. I do remember what I was going to ask you. So you joined GoBundance back in 2018. Can you talk about how that has impacted you, if at all, your career or whatever the case may be? Like, what's been the value of you being a part of a community like this?
I joined GoBundance primarily because I was looking for kind of a social circle that was, familiar to me. I think I was a pretty typical story, what they talk about with GoBundance. I was, off here, off in Tacoma, living my life, doing my thing. Most of the people that I interacted with on a daily basis were either my employees or, we had some kind of friends, like husbands of my wife's friends and, people we know from church. But it wasn't really like, I didn't have I wasn't connected to any other entrepreneurs that were doing anything even remotely like, that I was doing. So that's why I joined GoBundance. And I have gained, it took a little while to finally feel like I really fit in and I really knew the people. But, for sure, the biggest thing I've gotten out of GoBundance is the relationships. And then I think there's a lot of intangibles. It's hard to point to one specific thing, but when you kind of see all these people that and that they're not just celebrities, they're kind of like real guys doing real stuff, and you see their wins and their accomplishments, it just kind of constantly reinforces the idea that it's possible. And so it makes it a lot easier to believe that you can do all this stuff when you have all this evidence of other regular guys out doing it. And I think that's probably the, kind of the biggest impact is sort of just that, fostering this belief that success is, not just possible, but like imminently possible.
100%. And you've had enough success where you've been able to step up to the champion room recently. I think that was within the last year, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you tell me, correct me if I'm wrong on that. But how about that? Being part of the champion, which for those that don't know is our sort of next level up of net worth group. What is that? What value have you gotten from that? I mean, I've had some exposure to it, and it's been immensely valuable for me just to kind of peek at it. But you being a member of the champion division, just any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I just joined the Champions event just this past fall. The Champions group. The first event I went to they did a meetup in Austin back in October. So to back it up, so the very first event I went to with GoBundance was winter 2019 in Breckenridge. And at that point in time, I really had barely any idea what GoBundance was all about. I was extremely intimidated about going and being in a room full of millionaires. I think I expected them all to either look like the Monopoly man or like the guys you see driving around Newport Beach in their Mercedes convertibles. And I was kind of shocked that none of them looked like either of those two characters. Yeah. And in fact, you would have probably never thought you were in a room of millionaires. But then when I got there, so I was overwhelmed by the whole thing. And then I noticed there was these guys wearing black badges and they said champion on. I was like, well, I hadn't even heard of that. And so somebody explained what it was, and they got to, what you have to have a $5 million net worth, I think is what I was told at the time, I think, or you could have $1 million of income. But, they got to leave and go for a special dinner up in a private dining room. And I just remember thinking at the time, like, okay, I'm going to figure out what it takes to do that, because, that's way cooler than being in this room with just a bunch of single millionaires. And so, but anyhow, so that was 2019. And then, so I got into Champions this past year. So like it would have been October 2020. Yeah. And, there's a lot of things. One, there's less people in the room, which just increases the depth, like you get, there's less people to interact with. And so you can have a deeper interaction with more of them. And then there's also some really successful people in that room. I mean, I feel like I'm kind of the small fish in a big pond up there, but it's, it's inspiring. It's educational. I mean, it's just kind of it's a fun thing. Like, I hope that eventually there's another level to hit, because I do think it's motivating.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with you. That's my aspiration, is to be in that room as well. Like I said, I got to sit in on one day of one event recently, which was really cool to be a part of. And what was really neat to me was, while financial success, of course, is sort of foundational to be in that room, the discussion was more around parenthood, fatherhood, the kind of men that all of us are trying to be. That was really inspiring for me. So you, as you said, being inspired by a lot of these other guys, you're one of those guys for guys like me. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate being in this virtual room with you right now. So
one more thing.
Oh, go ahead.
So somebody else, because I think some guys in my pod had asked me about the Champions group, and kind of said, well, what's different? What's different in the Champions room than the Elite room? And I think the one thing that stands out as the most different is, I feel like a lot of guys, when they're kind of, in that $1 to $2 million range, they're looking for, tips and tricks. Everyone's kind of open to all of the different ways everybody else is making money. And they're all kind of like constantly running these ideas through their minds, saying like, oh, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could do this. Maybe I should go buy, mobile homes. Maybe I need an Airbnb. Maybe I should like go rent out my RV. Maybe I should go, they're like, it's overwhelming, all the choices. And generally speaking, that's not how you gain traction and make any real progress. So for the most part, I think the guys who've made it into the Champions room all kind of recognize that there's 1,000 ways to make money, but you can only really be good at one of them. And so they're no longer interested in hearing everybody else's tips and tricks. It's like, if you have a specific problem, there's guys in that room who've done it before and who've been through that problem, and they can help you and show you what you need to do to get to the next level. But, there's not very many people. I don't feel like in the Champions group, people are kind of, surveying one another, looking for their next big idea.
That makes total sense. Yeah, you're in a room of guys who have gone mile deep, inch wide, as opposed to maybe many of us. And you're right. I get shiny object all the time. Like, all right, I want to get to that level. So it's like, I know I'm in multifamily. Maybe I got to jump into this, and maybe I got to vertically integrate this business, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, linear focus, singular focus, really kind of driven through. So that makes sense. I like that. That's a really good distinction. I appreciate that. Very cool. So let's dive into your one sheet, the baseball card of your life. We're going to go pillar by pillar and learn a little bit more about you through this. Let's start with our first pillar around horizontal income. And quite simply, what is your horizontal income, and how many lines of income is that?
So horizontal income is $171,000. I mean, it's all, depending on how you want to count it, you could say it's 62 lines because there's 62 different apartments, but it's all multifamily. So I don't have any non-residential real estate, horizontal income coming in.
Gotcha. That probably answers the question about what percentage of your net worth is in real estate. Sounds like all of it at this point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have some, I have a little bit of, stock market exposure. I have some retirement accounts and stuff like that, but like, it's, relatively concentrated. I mean, probably 75% of it's in real estate.
Makes sense. How about your horizontal to net worth ratio? So your horizontal income as a percentage of your total net worth.
My horizontal to net worth ratio is only 3%.
Hey.
So that's probably a consequence of the fact that all of my horizontal income is, coming out of the Tacoma market where our cap rates are extremely low. And so there's not, if I was focused on horizontal income, I could certainly relocate my portfolio to somewhere where I'd earn a lot better return on my equity.
Makes sense. No, it makes perfect sense. And at this point, what percentager are you?
I know that number's on here somewhere. I'm an 88 percenter.
So getting close. Any big celebration plan when you hit the 100 mark? Go to Belize, something?
Probably not. But, it feels, it's nice to have horizontal income, and it's actually not my primary motivation right now. I mean, I kind of feel like we're in a spot right now where if we chose to, we could probably reallocate a lot of things and become 100%ers. But, that's not what we're doing. We're really focused on building the business.
Makes sense. Well, yeah, you've got a couple of deals in the till here. It sounds like that are going to really expand your portfolio and grow you quite a bit, on just a couple of deals. So very cool. Let's jump over to age defying health. So what is your current weight and body fat percentage?
I'm 165 pounds, about 18% body fat.
And you're pretty tall. You've got to be what, 6 foot, 6'1"?
Yeah, 6 foot even.
6 foot. Yeah. So pretty lean in that regard, which is good for you. How about your diet? What does that look like? How are you staying so lean? What are you eating?
So, diet shifts a little bit. I mean, I eat a very low carb diet. We've done different things. I mean, sometimes it's been full keto. Other times it's been just kind of more of a paleo diet. But my wife and I, now this we is me and my wife and I started, eating healthier a couple of years ago. And we've experimented with different versions of it. But generally speaking, we eat kind of a low carb paleo diet.
Makes sense. How about exercise? What's your routine look like these days?
My exercise routine is very ad hoc. I just, a lot of mornings I do, either pull-ups or push-ups kind of as part of my, miracle morning, but that's very much a short, that's a few minutes just to kind of get the blood pumping. And then I really don't have a regular, major workout routine. During hunting season, I do a ton of hiking. When it's not hunting season, occasionally I do some hiking, but I that's probably, if there's a weakness in my, in my system, it's probably the regular physical fitness part of it.
I've heard a lot of people that are a very physical, but they're like, if you could do only one thing, push-ups. So if you're doing that every morning, there's something to that, and you're remaining active, it sounds like, which is important. So yeah, hey, look, there's plenty of room in the spinning classroom. That's my spot. So always welcome to have you come in.
I hear there's a mouthy instructor though. I'm not sure I want to.
There's a few of them. It's kind of a compilation of like 5 of them, but yeah. I think I take a little poetic license with some of their comments as well. Authentic relationships. So you mentioned your wife. Tell me a little bit about your wife, kids. What's family life look like?
Okay, so my wife, we're coming up on our 22nd anniversary here in another month.
Congrats.
Kind of fun fact is we've actually known each other our entire lives. Like we grew up in the same nursery at the church we went to in Whittier. So I'm 2 years older than her, so I've known her whole life. But we got married young. 22 years. We've got 3 kids. I've got a 17-year-old daughter, a 12-year-old son, and a 9-year-old daughter.
Wow. What are anything that they're really into? You see them going into the family business at this point, or they have their own interests?
They're all into different things. So my 17-year-old right now is, she's basically been working as a full-time nanny for most of 2020. Like it was kind of a benefit to her when they canceled school, so she could just, do all of that. So she's been working as a full-time nanny. She's saving money. Her goal is to buy a house before she's out of high school. So that would put it sometime in the next year. She wants to own a rental property. We're kind of in that conversation right now about whether she's going to college. We'll see what happens with that. My son is, 12, and he's kind of the, he's definitely into all the video games and everything else. He's not the he's not the athletic one in the family. He kind of loves the, he likes everything, everything digital. And then my youngest one, she's kind of she's tall and lean, and she's outside climbing trees, never sits still. She's the wild one.
Bundle of energy. I like it. That's cool. How about your life happiness index? What is that currently, and what's the lowest category?
So based on the GoBundance method of calculating it, it comes out as an 8.35.
Happy man. I like that.
Yeah, I would generally say, if you just ask me happy or not, I'm happy. I'm an optimist, but 2, I'm just generally, I'm very happy.
Nice. And what are lows, if you have lows?
Oh, I put I've got 2 6s on my list, and one of them is in the exercise category, and the other is in parents and siblings.
Gotcha. Exercise we talked about. Sounds like you're just, hey, at some point you have to just kind of choose something and go with it. But talk about parents and siblings if you don't mind.
It's kind of, I think the issue there is, we just kind of drift apart more so than I might have wanted. There's no real family drama, family conflicts. There's just not. We're just kind of all doing our own thing. We're pretty close with all of my wife's siblings. And I think we look at some of my siblings and say, it'd be nice if we had a little more of that, but, there's no particular problem. I mean, I have as much responsibility as anybody for, kind of just letting those ties drift apart. We're pretty close to my parents, or we were pre-COVID, but, COVID's definitely affected the, frequency with which we've seen them in the last year. But, I'm really close with my dad. My parents live just, 10 minutes away from us. So it's really more the sibling side of it than the parent side of it.
Got it. No, that makes sense. Yeah. Time just kind of passes by, life happens. And before you know it, it's like, I haven't seen you in 6 months or whatever the case.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like people get busy, people move away, we don't all live in the same state anymore. So it's, you have to be that much more intentional to try to stay in contact.
Makes sense. All right, let's jump to genuine contribution. What is your current give back ratio? Or you could just, put out there what you are giving total, if you'd like, either one.
So my give back ratio, according to this, is 4%. Our biggest contributions we're pretty involved in Young Life. I don't know if you're familiar with what Young Life is, but
One Life, but I don't know Young Life. No.
Yeah, it's I confuse the two too, and I talk about it. I often interchange those two words. But so Young Life is a Christian organization. It's based on working with teenagers, but it's a little different. It's a little different than a youth group in the sense that its primary goal is not, kind of evangelism and, I guess, shepherding them in a church environment. It's much more about creating like adult mentorships and really just walking through life. It's for all teenagers, but it's probably a little bit focused on, kids who come from a little more troubled backgrounds. And so my wife's done it. My wife's been a Young Lives leader, which is a teen mom kind of segment of Young Life. And she's been a Young Lives leader for, I don't even know where we're at, 7 or 8 years now. And so I've worked with her and supported her in that. And then in the last couple of years, we became part of our local Young Life committee, which is kind of the local board of directors, is probably the closest equivalent. And so, we're pretty involved in that in a number of different ways. Our kids are also involved in Young Life groups and stuff. So that's our primary give back.
Love it. That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, it's nice to be focused on something, like you have a specific kind of agenda, if you will, with your contribution. On the accountability side, who is currently in your GoPod and how often do you meet?
So in my GoPod, I've got Trent Parks, James Aduna, Jonathan. Oh gosh, I'm horrible with names. Like what's Jonathan's last name? It's Jonathan, and then Gabe Radowski. I don't even know how to say his last name, but that's my GoPod. It's the 5 of us.
Gotcha. Do you meet weekly, every other week?
We meet every week, every Thursday morning.
Beautiful. What's the current topic of discussion, if there is one?
Well, so as of today, I think we spent, at least half the meeting talking about who's planning to go or not go to the steamboat trip in the summer and, debating what our opinions are on this whole vaccine rollout. But on a normal week, we typically kind of do highs and lows, and we kind of go around the room and everybody kind of does highs and lows from the last week. And then we, once a quarter, try to get through everyone's one sheets. But what typically happens is we get through about half of a one sheet in a day, and then the next week we make it up. And so it almost takes us a whole quarter just to get through all 5 one sheets, and then we're pretty much ready to start it over again. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, we have the same problem. It's hard to sum it up in 10 minutes when you want to dig in, right? You want to ask guys questions and really like get to the heart of it and go, levels deep. So we struggle a little bit with that as well. What are some of the biggest goals you have from a business perspective in the next 12 months?
So, next 12, my big goal right now is to get to 400 units. We're probably not going to hit that in 12 months, but that's kind of sometime between, it's probably more like a 24 to 36 month goal. I mean, specifically in the next 12 months, we look to be at least 150 units by the end of the year. And then the other kind of less tangible, but just as important goal is we're we're really working towards getting our internal property management and our internal construction businesses to be self-sufficient. We're kind of getting close to a size where, where we'll basically be collecting enough property management fees from our own properties to cover all of the overhead associated with property management, so that it's no longer a overhead drain. It's kind of its own little cost center, even though it's still purely internal. So that's what I'm working on, trying to get construction and property management to be self-sufficient and, grow the unit count.
I'm curious on the self-sufficiency part. Is that a function of, are you thinking of the right people? Are there systems, whether it's like an EOS, a Traction, eMyth, any of that stuff? Like what's
it's a combination. So like we do follow, we started implementing EOS, 4 years ago, and we've kind of been tinkering with it ever since. So part of it's systems, part of it's just scale. I mean, the thing is, you need a certain amount of rent coming in every month that, so that if you're charging yourself a 5% management fee, it covers your nut. So I mean, part of it's just getting to the point where we have enough rent coming in that we can cover the management. On the construction side, it's similar. It's a lot of it's just having, you can only make, we're basically an internal customer. So we're paying ourselves to do this work. And so, you've just got to have enough volume of work to cover the overhead. So, but we are working on systems. We're working on people. I'm always intrigued by these different, kind of management philosophies. We were following EOS for a while, and then like I said, we kind of tinker with it. Like I just read Don Wenner's book. Have you read that? Building an Elite Organization. It's a really, really good book. And so he's built this phenomenal business. It's crazy. DLP Capital is this amazing example of what you can do with, a real estate investment business. But he follows some sort of a mashup that he created that's like part EOS, part 4DX, 4 disciplines of execution, and then part all of the good to great concepts. And he's kind of his is fairly complex. He calls it the Elite operating system. And so anyhow, so we're tinkering with some of that too. It's fun.
Gotcha. But no, it makes sense. So the heart of it is you scale the unit count that allows you to potentially have the revenue you need to fund these internal businesses so that you can continue to maybe operationalize and systematize them. That makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
What about bucket list adventures? What are some of the greatest future hits that you have coming up for you? Any big adventures you have coming up?
I don't have a lot of traditional bucket list adventures. I think, my big long-term goals, the two things that that drive me more than anything else is ultimately I want to live on a ranch, probably in Montana. And I want a second home down in the desert, specifically inside Bighorn, which is in Palm Desert in California. Those are like my two big life goals. The only thing that I have on my list that's kind of a bucket list adventure is at some point it'd be fun to go on a mountain sheep hunt, but like I don't even have a particular time stamp on that because it'll happen one of these days.
Key question: where in the world does somebody go on a mountain sheep hunt? Does that happen in like Timbuktu? Where does that happen?
No, I mean, ideally, if I draw the tags, I want it'll happen in Nevada, but we'll see where it. The thing is, generally speaking, the Western U.S. or Canada and Alaska is kind of some of the best. I mean, that's what I'm looking at. I mean, I'm sure you can go hunt some other weird sheep in India or something, but I'm just talking about regular old Rocky Mountain Bighorn sheep.
So are sheep difficult to hunt? I don't mean to be ignorant about this, but like I feel like I've seen sheep at like a petting zoo and they just don't move much.
Yeah, I know. You're driving around Colorado and you see them standing on the side of the road. Like the thing is, it's not that they're difficult to hunt. There's a couple of factors. One, it's very difficult or expensive to draw a tag. Like you either have to pay 40, 50 grand for a tag, or you can, try to draw one in the various lottery options. And it's very, just very hard to draw. And then it's not that they're particularly difficult from a hunting standpoint, but where they live is very difficult to access. So it's not that like there's actually much harder animals to locate and hunt, but you might have to climb to the top of a mountain to kill the sheep.
I'm just picturing that. So I can see like you get to the top, you're kind of loaded up, ready to go. You're out of breath, and you're almost like telling the sheep, like, just 1 minute, I'm gonna kill you in a minute. Give me 1 sec. You're kind of dropped on your knees.
Yeah.
I love it. That's 50 grand to do that. This is a thing. This is like an elite exclusive sport. This is crazy.
Yeah, well, it is crazy. And and part of me there's part of me that feels like I don't really want to go pay my way in. I want to, earn it or, draw it, kind of, you know what I mean, like organically. So we'll see. I mean, at some point in time, I'll probably just decide that I'll, pay to do it if I want to. But like, honestly, if the opportunity presented itself right now and somebody said, oh, hey, I'll give you a half price deal for 25 grand, we can go kill a sheep, I don't think I'd want to. I'm kind of, I'll take my chances. Let's see if I can draw one in the next 10 years. So we'll see.
I like it. So you got a goal within the goal. That's very cool. All right. Well, let's wrap this up with a random question from the GoBundance card game. I did pull this before. I did not tell you, nor do I tell anybody what the question was, but it is the 4 of diamonds. I don't know why I always give the card. It really doesn't matter, but I feel like I need to. But here's the question. What do you love and appreciate about yourself?
What do I love and appreciate about myself?
Deep, man. Deep.
I probably love that I am optimistic and a risk taker. I mean, I think those are kind of both two things that have served me well. I mean, they can get me into trouble occasionally because I, tend to always think everything's going to work out perfectly. But, I mean, I think that's, I probably owe most of what I've accomplished in life to, taking risks and being optimistic. And so I like that about me.
I love that. I took this course once upon a time called Sacred Gifts, and it's got a religious overtone to it, but it has 24 different gifts that you learn which are yours, and you have multiple. But one of the gifts, and it's an interesting thing to call it a gift, is extraordinary trust, which essentially leans into what you just talked about, a little bit of optimism, some risk taking, kind of a general idea of like, I'm going to go with what I think is the right thing to do and trust that I can either deal with whatever's going to happen or that I'm going to succeed one way or the other, even if it's not immediately, or if I have instant failures or failures along the way, I will succeed in the end. So it sounds like you have that gift, which is really, really neat. So there you go. You have that gift from me that you have that gift.
Thank you.
Something like that. Daniel, how can people learn more about you? Website, social media handle, anything that you want to put out there for people to either reach out to you or learn more about you and your business?
I'm on Facebook. I'm not super social media. I don't even have an Instagram account. So, but you can find me on Facebook. You can email me. I'm Daniel@blackrocknw.com, which is also the URL of our construction company. It's blackrocknorthwest.com. So
beautiful. Well, hey man, I appreciate it. Learned a ton as always from you. This is like the second time I've gone deep with you on who you are and everything, and I've gotten more nuggets, including mountain sheep hunting. I've never heard of this before. So very cool. I appreciate you being on, and thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's fun.
Cool. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know down in the comments, and make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you can be informed on the next episode and other content right here on this channel. Thank you.